time for another MetLife TTX Talks, our series that shines the spotlight on inspirational women in STEM. For those that are new here, we say welcome. And for those that are returning, thank you so much for joining us once again. My name is Katie Linendahl, and I'm so happy to be partnered once again with MetLife supporting these TTX Talks. Now, we have an exciting, energizing conversation for you today. Joining us is Allie Miller. Allie is a top artificial intelligence leader, advisor, and investor. In this talk, Allie is going to discuss the opportunities and challenges she has faced as a woman in STEM. And she's going to share advice for women on how to get ahead. Now, without further ado, welcome Allie Miller in discussion with Bill Pappas, Head of Global Technology and Operations at MetLife. Bill, take it away.
Allie Miller, welcome to MetLife's TTX Talks.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We're so glad to have you here. So today we'll be discussing topics on ways to advance and elevate the career of the next generation women in STEM. This is a cause that I, as well as MetLife, we feel very committed and we're very passionate about it. And let's start kind of the origins of how you got where you are today. So the first question that everybody wants to ask, were you interested in STEM growing up?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have a mom who was a math teacher and a systems programmer. And so I think now, only as an adult looking back, do I realize that all of the math games that we were playing in the car, she was slowly training me for the eventual future that I would have. But I've always been obsessed with problem solving, certainly always raised my hand first in math classes. And so I feel like it was my eventual story to move into AI.
The power of the mother, never underestimate. So I read that your undergrad degree is in cognitive science, and this is a combination of computer science, psychology, and linguistics. So tell us why that degree, and what or who inspired you to pursue a STEM education?
My movement into cognitive science was actually a little bit of a mistake. I stumbled on it. I was taking a linguistics class, a psychology class, a math class, a computer science class, and I was complaining to a friend that I wanted to have 4 majors. And she was like, "You do realize that you're just describing what cognitive science is." So I kind of stumbled into it through frustration. I ended up writing an independent study on natural language processing. My focus was on understanding email sentiment. This was before smartphones, right? Before we were able to use emojis.
Yep.
And so the world of natural language processing has obviously changed in the last decade, but to see it at the forefront, I mean, it was really exciting.
Let's transition to your career. When you were at IBM, you were the youngest woman to manage the creation of AI product. What was it like to spearhead something that was that innovative at such an early stage of your career?
You know, I look back to my years at IBM and I realized that I was very lucky to get that role. And I think if I really looked at it, it's not that I was some genius, because I promise you I'm not. My parents would remind you that I'm not. It's that someone took a chance on me. It's that a mentor reached down, grabbed me and pulled me up and really showed me the way. So, you know, I think it's almost just as important to find that champion to be able to support you. And it sounds like, I mean, even just the way that you were talking about how MetLife is supporting your employees, very, very similar.
Did you face any challenges or resistance as you got into it? And it was obviously new, not well defined, and very young in your career. Any challenges, or how did you overcome them as well?
Yeah, I almost think that there were more challenges than easy bits to it. And I'm so glad that I went through those harder years, because now when I see a challenge, I just am excited to take it on. I think one of the biggest challenges that early product managers take on, and this is compared to a smaller startup that I was at where I led product, but it was a much smaller team, was that we had these huge teams. And, you know, I was not an engineer. I was trying to figure out who does what and how does the whole workflow work and how does this point move to that point. And one of the biggest things that I did was just to try and build team empathy. And so one by one, I would ask engineers out to lunch. I would ask engineers about their family. I would ask engineers how they got to that position, what are their goals. And so rather than having it be solely focused on the work and the AI product that we were building, and of course the customer value and all these other pieces that go around it, it really started with culture and people and building up a strong team.
I think that's fascinating. And to your point, And one of the things that you just talked about, which goes to my next question, what is the advice that you can give to young women who dream to be on the first forefront? So you talked about being completely open, but that empathy. So it is technical, but it's also is that emotional connections that you need to make with your team to be able to lead and to be able to just feel as a team, especially at the pace. But any specific advice that you can have for somebody who's young in their career and they want to be you and stay at the forefront?
Balance is unbelievably important. You know, I remember teaching coding at my first job to people that just wanted to join. Like, we started a little coding club, right? So there was that side of the work, but I've also been a singer for my whole life, right? My voice is a little raspy because I was singing the last 3 days. And so it's having that kind of art and science balance is certainly part of it. The bigger advice that I would say about taking advantage and getting to where the future is going is to turn curiosity into action. I talk to so many young women who are still staying up to date on AI, who are reading about new tools, who are reading guides of how to use these AI tools. And it's about putting your hands on the keyboard and actually using them. Only through that are you going to figure out what these tools can do, what they can't do. You'll be able to start to predict where these things are going to be going. And so it's about figuring out what are the secondary impacts and how can I build for that future rather than something quite short term.
So curiosity into action.
Yes.
The other thing that you just, as you talked about even your degree and as you talked about going into IBM, your willingness to take some of the risk, because you talked about it, how do you get comfortable to being uncomfortable, and then how do you turn that curiosity into action? And then you also talk about, and you need somebody to be able to pull you at the same time and give you that opportunity. So there's a tremendous amount of all of those little things came together for this one to be able to come to life. So that's impressive.
You know, I honestly think that we read these stories about unbelievably successful people in their 20s or even in high school, and we see these stories go through on social media and we think to ourselves, I have to have my entire life figured out in my 20s or in my 30s or 40s. And when I'm actually in these corporate spaces, I'm sure you see this too, no one knows what they're doing. People are still figuring out their dreams. I just read about a woman who's getting her PhD at 70. So I think that there's this false narrative that we create for ourselves. And if we can reject that and instead focus on the joy of learning and the joy of experimentation, it becomes much more about having an open mind toward those moments of curiosity and action. Or else I wouldn't have been able to pivot into this space that I'm in.
I agree. So I'm not a big fan of what is your next 5-year plan anymore. It used to be, and I'm older than you are, but it used to work for at some point. But right now the environment is so fluid and you do not want to stay out from anything. So that curiosity, that action, that ability to be able, to your point, to be able to feel comfortable to be uncomfortable is huge as you move forward and gets you to a situation that you will have not even dreamed to be. I never thought I would be a head of technology and operations. I didn't even know what that meant when I was at school, but all of these very similar circumstances, it's interesting.
And you're amazing at it. My job at Amazon, I was the first person in the world with that job. That job did not exist when I went to college. So if I was graduating and I had this perfect plan, it never would have materialized. And then I also would have felt like a failure if I didn't achieve that. There's something actually really positive about having a more open landscape. And of course, you know, your company benefits from you being in this role too.
I saw a quote from you the other day, which I found it really impactful. You said that AI needs everyone. Explain what that means to our audience.
I've been trying to share what this means, and I think I've realized that the best way to explain it is by explaining the opposite of it, which is, what does a world look like when only one type of person is governing our entire AI system? When it's only one country developing what AI looks like, when it's only one gender, when it's only one socioeconomic class, when it's only one graduating program, right? Like, there's a certain limitation, artificial limitation, that we would be putting on human capabilities if we narrow it down. And I think one of the most exciting things that's really happened in AI in the last, call it 2 years, has really been the accessibility of this technology. That was one of the biggest things that ChatGPT brought to the forefront, was that everyone could
We're
use
able
it.
to do it.
Your kids could use it. Your grandma and grandpa could use it. I was just at a lunch spot getting barbecue in Raleigh. I taught a woman next to me how to use ChatGPT.
Yep.
Right? So it's that accessibility that I'm unbelievably excited to see what happens when people who can't code are able to actually use this technology.
And also you talk about it in other forums that you also need the diversity of the thoughts and the skills to be able to develop it. So I see this as a foundational piece. So to your point, when you kind of develop something, it needs to be good for everybody else. How do you democratize it, and how do you make it accessible and easy to use?
Absolutely.
We know we're really big on our MetLife Triangle Techs Conference, which, as I said before, we're focusing on really on women in STEM. One of the main takeaways that we had last year's event was that AI, along with humans, can transform the way we work. How are you seeing this play out in the workforce today?
So I have a framework for thinking about how AI is moving into business, and I think of the 3 Ps, and it's moving into people operations, the actual process of a business, and eventually the products that these businesses are creating. And so on the people side, I imagine a future where every single person at your company and every other company has an AI co-pilot that they're using to get through their day. And maybe it's summarizing emails. Maybe it's helping to brainstorm in meetings. On the process side, thinking about back office that, frankly, when I was young, I didn't even really know that these things were happening. But if you only knew how much time was spent on invoices and contracts, like that's one thing that I would love for more women and certainly young folks to be exposed to. And then on the product side, just thinking about what unbelievable revenue generation opportunities there are for anyone watching this. You know, start thinking about AI first products and not just products that have a little bit of AI sprinkling on top.
Makes sense. Are there any specific trends that you're looking at to stay ahead in terms of how the workplace is going to change?
Absolutely. I think the 2 that I would want to call out is hyper-personalization. So everything getting customized to a market of one. If you think about like sales emails that you get, maybe they segmented out into 20 cohorts or something. The idea that I could have not only just a sales email customized to me, because that's somewhat helpful. What if a movie was customized to me? A book was customized to me? A website, a business, a product was customized to me? That is the future that AI at scale is going to be able to build. So hyper-personalization is certainly one. Another that I'm really excited for is proactive systems that are built around our goals. So right now, when you go into Google or you're using your email or you're accessing a web page, they're guessing at what you want, right? I know you're a marathon runner, right? What if every single time you were using an AI system, you could say, and by the way, I'm training for my 10th marathon. And all of a sudden, those recommendations of what you might see in your social feed tweak to showing some,
I would love that.
Okay.
I will
I'll go ahead and
absolutely
build that
invent so that. Please do so.
So those are the 2 things that I'm really excited about. And that's, just when I think about being more human, right? The self-awareness that we have to move into the future with intentionality, we're going to need to know our own goals to be able to even better manage AI systems.
I can see that you're definitely long on AI, and I am too, but if you have to pick one thing that excites you the most about the AI potential, what will that be?
I'm going to vote for democratizing intelligence.
Okay.
And I'll give you one example here. So I know about AI. Quantum computing, not a pro at. Biology, not a pro at. Chemistry, not a pro at. And I use AI tools to understand some of the more recent research in that space. And so suddenly something that was completely closed off to me is suddenly open, right? I know a little bit of Python, I can get away with it, but I can now code projects in Python because I'm going back and forth with this Copilot. So the idea that doors that were previously closed are now not just cracked open, smashed open with shards of wood everywhere. I mean, that is unbelievably exciting. So certainly that democratization.
It's so early into this. I don't think people realize how powerful that can be. You've seen some of the early indications, but the whole idea that knowing enough, it may be actually more than enough to be able to utilize some of those tools. It's just very powerful. What should people be doing to take advantage of AI at this point?
So even just thinking about that democratization of intelligence, there is going to be a reskilling, right? Rather than writing emails from scratch, it's going to be more about editing that email. Or rather than writing a business memo from scratch, it's about co-working with AI. So I think one is starting to use these systems so you can get a sense of what that new skill set is going to look like. And my biggest advice here, other than just get your hands on the keyboard or use voice to be able to work with these tools, I would actually tell people to try and break it. I get on these systems and I put on like my maniac hat. And I'm like, how is someone gonna break this? How is someone gonna use this for wrong? How is someone gonna try and lie to it? Because that makes me a much more successful future predictor, because I'm not just, you said I'm wrong on AI. Absolutely, but it's a risk mitigation and trade-off that I'm able to couch all of it with. So, I would certainly tell people, try these systems, get your hands dirty, but also start to think in the back of your head, where are the fault lines, where are the guardrails that should be set up, what regulation can you expect, and how might these systems fail, especially with people involved.
No, and this is definitely, I can start seeing that even the industry, we're not as mature yet, but those are the same powerful tools that everybody can use, and we can use it for good and we can use it not for good. So how do you even, we talked a lot, how does AI can actually monitor AI and diffuse some of those risks that you have? Now, let's stay on that theme, because I have a big team, and in addition of the excitement around AI, there is also concerns about AI and what does the future holds for them. So what will you say to someone who feels that way?
I tell people to find the fear. I think a lot of people show up to work, show up to conversations or conferences and say, I'm afraid of AI. And I lean into that. I'm like, tell me more about that. Where's that fear coming from? Have you tested these products? Have you used it? Did you study computer science, growing up? And I try and go 3 levels deeper to try and diagnose. And what I found is that about 70% of the folks that I talk with, it's a fear of the unknown. It's a fear that hasn't yet been tested by testing these products. And again, I say to test these products not because I believe you should build your entire life around it, but because that's the education that tells you whether you want to pursue using that tool or not. There is certainly a decision where people might say, AI is not right here. I want to pursue something only human, and that is up to the individual. But for folks that feel anxious, worried, you are completely validated. We are very early, and the pace, the rate of change feels different. I ache with college students that might have already changed their major halfway through their schooling, right? That is happening already. And so again, I know we've already talked about keeping an open mind, but it's that upstream self-awareness that also just helps you be a better thinker and doer in the future. But certainly that self-awareness is big.
I resonate with 2 comments. The first one is about my oldest one just graduated with a degree in data and analytics. The skill set of learning, unlearning, relearning, it is the most important thing than the actual subject that you study. Because at the end of the day, I graduated 30 years ago. There is nothing 30 years ago that makes sense today or fit for purpose. So I think that's the other muscle that we need to make sure, even at companies or universities, we keep developing. But one of the things, as you talk to a lot of companies, how do you think about the importance of building safe places for the people that they're fearful to be able to just come and ask those questions and start the dialogue that we just talked about?
Communication channels is a really important piece of AI change management, to give people a space to ask those questions. Some companies are allowing that to be asked anonymously. Some companies are having smaller breakout groups. Some companies are hosting almost like a help desk where you can go and just ask a question. But I think if I look at each of those solutions, there's this umbrella piece, which is, I want to be at a place that has a culture of curiosity and learning. If you are a young person looking at potential companies to join, I want to ask, what does your learning and development look like? What does your upskilling look like? How are you thinking about AI training right now? And if they don't have an answer for that, that might be a sign that they're, just a bit more behind.
How do you create the culture that your company is becoming a destination for talent, skill sets, and we're assuming that the skill set is not going to stay constant, and it's not about the role anymore, it's about the skill set, and skill set is becoming a currency, but you need to be able to ensure that you have the contemporary skill set as you move forward.
Yes. And we know for a fact that the skill set is going to change.
Absolutely.
And that departments are going to be prioritizing new skills, right? These are all getting combined. So, I think just looking for a company, and by the way, that means that the flip side is true too.
Correct.
Companies should be advertising what they're doing in the space and sharing widely how they're upskilling and maintaining education among their workers, because that's going to attract talent.
I agree. Let's talk about role model. So one of the things that you always talked about it, and you yourself, you're a role model to so many women and girls everywhere. So talk about the importance of finding role models or mentors and any impact they had in your career.
I would be no one without my mentors. I mean, I really, really mean that. I look at each of these big wins that I've had in my career, getting this job, getting that job, getting promoted, and I look and I go, I always had at least one champion pulling me up, helping me understand how to navigate this space. Corporations can be very confusing when you're new, or at least early in your career. So mentorship has definitely illuminated that. I think the second thing that I learned a bit later in the mentorship journey is that I inaccurately believed that I had to find a perfect mentor, right? I'm sure you're a perfect mentor to many, but it can be really hard to find the perfect, ideal, utopian mentor. And the shift that actually a mentor of mine gave, Adam Grant, told me to look instead for a personal board of directors, where maybe this mentor is really good at AI, and this mentor is really good at social media, and this mentor is really good at business paradigm shifts, and so on and so forth. And so now when I look at my mentor personal board of directors, it's 20 people. They're not even all senior, right? I look up to Gen Z as inspirations of how are they using new tools and how are they staying educated. It is a two-way mentorship path, and I love the idea of a diverse set of mentors who are teaching me, each little things from their background.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and one of the things that I find out is, to your point, mentorship is not hierarchical. So I learn a lot as I go deeper within the organization, because obviously they're closer to the customer, they're closer to the work, but also the people, they're willing to actually tell you what it is. So there is one thing to be able to be the mentor, there is another thing to make sure the mentor is actually incredibly truthful, and it takes a lot. And I found that the diversity, but also moving away from that hierarchical, that perfect mentor, that people, that made sense years ago, but it's not right now. But I think that's incredibly important. All right, so before we close, we're going to do a lightning round. So this is quick answers only. Are you ready?
I think so.
Good. It's not complicated. So you have, I just read, more than 1 million followers on LinkedIn. So is it exciting or is it scary?
Both, and it depends on the hour.
Your first job?
I worked at Jamba Juice, and I tried to memorize as many smoothie orders as I could and did my own data analysis.
I love that. Science or math, which do you enjoy more?
I gotta give the nod to my mom, it's gonna be math.
Excellent. You have traveled to all 7 continents, so do you have a favorite one?
Antarctica is the most, interesting.
Yes.
But I also just finished a 3-year road trip, and I have come to greatly appreciate all the different states that is in the United States. So I went to Montana, I went to New York, I went to Central California, I went to Texas. It was just great.
Love it. And the last one, favorite personal activity outside of STEM?
Singing and archery tied for first.
You need to tell me more about the singing thing. I didn't know. I did not read that anywhere. So you like to sing?
I've been a singer my whole life.
Wow.
I was in a college a cappella group, and I think half of us now work in AI. It's a very strange thing where, because we were all collaborating late nights in the computer science lab, I think we just naturally all went into the space. But been a singer, and I think every single person should have a little bit of art in their life.
I agree. So as we wrap up this discussion, any parting thoughts that you would like to leave our audience, particularly the young women, that they're out there perhaps either curious or already passionate about STEM and AI?
This is, to use your words from earlier, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. You cannot be in a better position than to be a young person right now who understands technology, who has a brain ready to learn. You're just coming out of school or you're in school. I am so jealous of young people today. And so to that I would say, take full advantage and do a little more accountability and get a group together, right? Don't go at it alone. Turn that curiosity into action with some of your best friends.
Well, we will leave it to that. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's very not only inspiring, but you gave us some incredible great points that not only they left impression with me, but I'm sure that to all the folks that they're watching. So thank you for being with us today, and we're looking forward to seeing you again on our next TTX Talks.
Well, thank you to Bill for moderating such an impactful conversation, and thank you to Allie for sharing your empowering story filled with so many helpful insights for the workforce. I think we can all agree you've certainly highlighted so many great points that will leave an impression on all those who are watching today. And of course, if you've missed any of MetLife's TTX Talks, head on over to MetLife's YouTube channel to stay up to date. And also a reminder, you too can get involved in the conversation by joining our TTX LinkedIn group for the latest trends, updates, and highlights on advancing women in STEM. Thank you all for being a part of this discussion, and we look forward to seeing you in our next TTX Talks.